Welcome back to Christian Questions on News Talk 102.3 FM, WXLM. Our subject this morning, should Christians be speaking in tongues? To be a part of our program, call 860-442-6102. That's 442-6102.
And Jonathan, let's we just read 1 Corinthians 14, 1 through 5. Now, those points on the other side of the issue, points 1 and 2. The first one was to edify you, and it used 1 Corinthians 14:4. He who speaks in a tongue edifies himself. And the second point was to speak to God divine secrets, and they used 1 Corinthians 14:2. Anyone who speaks in a tongue does not speak to men but to God. You say, okay, if you take those phrases as individual phrases, I can understand how you get that conclusion.
Right.
Here's the problem.
Context. Context.
And, you know, honestly and truly, back in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, now this is all a continuous reasoning. Let's not forget this. The Apostle Paul is saying that the body needs one another. We need to work with each other to build each other up. You can't say to this part or that part, I don't need you. So this idea of edifying yourself sort of puts who in the middle? You. Is that the way it's supposed to be?
No.
Look at 1 Corinthians 13, the chapter before. It talks about that selfless love. So I think that phrase, he who speaks in a tongue edifies himself, that's not a complimentary statement.
No, it's not.
The apostle isn't saying that to say, oh, do that to edify yourself. He's saying, look, you're only just patting yourself on the back. But that's not what you're here for. How do we know that? Read the previous 2 chapters, and he'll let you know that. And then he says, you know, to the second point, to speak to God divine secrets, anyone speaking in tongues does not speak to men but to God. Now, why does he say that? Because nobody can understand what you're saying. That's why. You don't even know what you're saying, and nobody else can understand it. So where's the value in it? And again, this is in the context of building up one another in this most holy faith that we're given. And we'll see that in the next section of verses chapter 14, verses 6 through 9.
Now, brothers and sisters, if I come to you speaking in tongues, how will I benefit you unless I speak to you in some revelation or knowledge or prophecy or teaching? It is the same way with lifeless instruments that produce sound, such as the flute or the harp. If they do not give distinct notes, how will anyone know what is being played? And if the bugle gives an indistinct sound, who will give ready for battle? So with yourselves, if a tongue you utter speech that is not intelligible, how will anyone know what is being said? For you will be speaking into the air.
Okay, so there it is. I think the apostle is being very clear. He's giving another example of the uselessness of this gift of speaking in tongues when it's taken out of context. Okay, you're speaking into the air. Now, before he said, you're speaking to God. Now, here he said, same thing, you're speaking into the air. So what is he saying? He's saying your words are like an instrument that's just playing random notes, and nobody understands what it's supposed to be playing. It's like, the bugle with the battle call. If it's not playing something that draws people to battle, then nothing good is going to happen. It's not going to accomplish what it set out to do.
You're wasting your breath.
Exactly. You are wasting your breath. That's what the apostle is saying about speaking in tongues out of their proper context. Now, what is the proper context? It is that, well, actually, you know what? Let's read 1 Corinthians 14, verses 11 through 14, because that explains what the proper context is.
If then I know not the meaning of the voice, I shall be to him that speaketh a barbarian, and he that speaketh will be a barbarian unto me. Also ye, since ye are zealous of spiritual gifts, seek that you may abound unto the edifying of the church. Wherefore let him that speaketh in a tongue pray that he may interpret. For if I pray in a tongue, my spirit prayeth, but my understanding is unfruitful.
So now he's using another. This must have been a big problem.
Yeah.
Because the apostle doesn't just treat it, in a couple of lines and move on to the next thing. He devotes chapters to developing the reasoning to get it right.
The Corinthian church must have desired to have this because it was such an outward manifestation that they were building up in pride, I think.
And I think one of the things, again, you look at the background of the Corinthian church, and the Corinthian church came out of Corinth. Hey, there you go. And Corinth was an incredibly idolatrous place. Remember, idolatry is the worshiping of the created rather than the creator.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, the misuse of the gifts was a form of idolatry.
Ah.
And I think that's what the apostle was driving at here. Now, he doesn't say that in those words. That's a conclusion we're drawing as we look at how he is putting this together. But he's saying that, you're edifying yourself. What are you doing? You're worshiping yourself. You're putting yourself as the centerpiece. In this last section of verses, he says, if you don't know the meaning of the voice, it's like you're a barbarian. And I'm not understanding you, and you're not understanding me. And where's the value in that? He's saying, obviously, you said that they must have had a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
He says, obviously, you're zealous of spiritual gifts. Okay, you guys want these things. I mean, it's like a new toy. Okay, seek that you may abound unto the edifying, not of yourself, of the church. Wherefore, let him that speaks in a tongue pray that he may interpret. So if you're going to be speaking a foreign language, you better have somebody be able to explain what it is that was spoken. Because if you don't, there's no value. You've done the wrong thing. See, understand, I think that's what he's saying. To me, this is dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
He's not saying, well, it might be better that you might want to maybe consider possibly, if you feel like it, not doing it. He's saying that's the wrong thing to do.
Edify the church instead.
Right.
And this reminds me of international Bible conferences, where if you have someone speaking from France, and how could someone from Germany or Russia understand? Well, there should be an interpreter,
right,
feeding the Christian individuals the words to understand what's being said, and that goes on.
Right, and that's actually a pretty impressive thing when you see it happening. Now, of course, these are people who are learned in those languages, but if you go to even like at the UN, for instance, you have someone speaking at the UN, and you have all of the interpreters
mm-hmm.
with the ambassadors, and they're translating as it's happening.
Because it's edifying.
Right.
To everyone there.
And without the translation, it's just noise.
Yes.
That's all it is. It's just noise. The apostle is being very straightforward on this. And I'm harping on this because to me this is just such an important point in understanding the proper use of those particular gifts. So, folks, if you have a thought, it's 860-442-6102. That's 442-6102. Let's go on to 1 Corinthians 14, verses 15 through 17.
What should I do then? I will pray with the Spirit, but I will pray with the mind also.